Welcome to Straight Lines. This is where life lessons meet leadership, where business gets a front row seat, and where you will get a blueprint for success. Whether you're managing a team, building a brand, or just trying to lead yourself better, you're in the right place. Because here on Straight Lines, we believe the shortest distance between purpose and progress is truth, clarity, and action. Straight Lines, brought to you by Blue Book Sports, has been the game's trusted directory since 1909, and now it's where businesses connect directly with players, parents, and coaches. Create a profile, promote your services, and join the community. If your business wants to stand out, it's time to get in the book. Download Blue Book Sports today from Apple or Google Play. I am extremely giddy, excited, honored to have a very special guest with us today. Chris Kolenda has done unbelievable things in his life and continues to do so. You know, military veteran, retired Army colonel, served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Negotiated with the Taliban. Beat them up on the battlefield, and then brought them to the peace talks. Just so many great things that he has done. And before anything, thank you so much for your service. It's incredible. Currently, Strategic Leaders Academy, where that's all built on leadership, culture, and strategy. And he's in the $1 Million Club. I forget exactly what that is. That is the
that's Alan. That's my friend's Consulting Hall of Fame.
Yeah, there you go. The Consulting Hall of Fame. That's what it was. I knew I saw that somewhere, but pretty good. But what that says is that you continue to work with, people and make them better, and, apply all the leadership lessons that you've learned through your career. And so again, thank you for your service, sir. And I'm so honored to have you with me.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I appreciate you.
We're going to dump into some things here, and we'll see where we could probably carve this up and have a 80 episodes, but we'll cover some ground here for sure. You've led in complex environments, unbelievable, unimaginable stuff. Is there anything early in your experience that may have shaped your philosophy from that kind of thing, from a leadership sense?
Oh, there are a number of, I guess, early episodes. I like to say that I've made most of the available mistakes as a leader, and if I can help other people avoid those things, that would be good. And one of the early mistakes I made was creating dependency and believing that I was indispensable. And I remember we were on a military exercise, and I think it was like a 4 or 5 day thing. And I swear I stayed up the entire time.
Ooh.
And because I was convinced or had convinced myself that I needed to be available. I needed to be available for decisions. I need to be able to support people. I needed to make sure that everything was going the way it should be. And people depended on me. And so I stayed up the entire time. And I believe it was like 96 hours straight. And by the end of it, of course, I'm just simply babbling and making no sense whatsoever. We finally get finished. I remember falling asleep in the armored vehicle on our way back, and went off to bed and slept for about 18 hours. And I woke up, and one of the soldiers was like, "Hey, he's still alive." And I recognized from that, it's like, everything happened just fine, without me. And by the end of this, I wasn't any good to anybody. And in fact, I was probably more dangerous to anybody than anything. And so this is a huge lesson for me about, number one, don't believe you're indispensable. And this is a big problem in the servant leader sort of milieu, if you will, where when taken to the extreme, it's creating this sort of dependency, no boundaries. I must be everywhere. I must do everything, not take care of myself. bear any burden and create any sacrifice, etc. And it simply leads to burnout, and it leads to people being dependent on you and less self-reliant and proactive than they should be. And so I learned from that I have to take care of myself. So the oxygen mask principle is very important. You can't lead other people when you are flat on your back. And then B is you got to develop people, because dependency is what eats a lot of leaders' lunch, because more and more stuff piles on their plate. And I mean, when you think about it, dependency actually comes from being like, people aren't dependent on weak leaders. They get dependent on strong leaders, and that can become a little bit intoxicating.
Yeah.
And so they defer to your judgment and your skills and everything like that. And so now more and more is coming up on your plate, and they're becoming less and less independent, because they're always looking for permission. They're always looking for your blessing on stuff. And that starts to lead into this downward spiral. So those are two big early lessons that I learned from one of my very famous face plants.
That's great. That's great stuff. We talk about, leaders creating more leaders. I mean, that's kind of the way I see that sometime, where, they don't need to be dependent on us. I've always subscribed to, and still do to this day, is surround yourself with great people, and then get out of the way. Let them do their job. Obviously, in the military, there's a lot more, chain of command structure, discipline, perhaps, than in a boardroom, but I'm not sure it's a whole lot different. And to be able to trust those folks around you that you put in place so you can get some sleep, I think is kind of a big deal, for anybody in a leadership position. And of course, to try to create more leaders. I think that is so imperative. Defining moment, perhaps, in your military career that, kind of, it's like, geez, this was something that stuck out in my mind, never forget. And I'm sure you perhaps have many of those, but anything that sticks out to you?
Yeah, there are a few, and just to go back to your earlier your earlier point, which is so important. Yeah, our job is to create other leaders. I mean, that's how organizations strengthen. That's how organizations grow. And when I look at all the best leaders in my life, they were the ones um, that help people contribute their best and be the best versions of themselves. Not the ones that were trying to hold people back or had to be the smartest person in the room. So I think the point that you made there is absolutely vital. And as George Patton said, like, tell people what to do, but not how to do it, and they'll
No.
amaze you with their ingenuity. I mean, when you tell people what to do and how to do it, you are um, your imagination caps their performance.
Yeah, creating some robots, and in a
Yeah.
way. And again, I mean, just from a baseball standpoint of coaching, but I think any athletics, and perhaps any business, I think I've always filled in the blanks where maybe I had some weakness, and I think
Mm,
that's important to do. And again, just to let them grow, let them lead. In coaching, I'm trying to get them to become head coaches. I think I've had
mm,
23 different guys that moved on to professional baseball and college baseball. That's a lot of guys, in a small vacuum, and I've always been proud of that. I just talked about two on a little clip I put out from the trustees chair. Was celebrating in the success of others, Chris. And I think the
right.
military does a tremendous job of that, and I think they reward that. I mean, we all need the pat on the back. I call them verbal bouquets. But the military, awards and the medals and everything else. I mean, your thoughts on that? Just celebrating in the success of others. I think it's critical to do that, and I think it's important in any organization.
Yeah, whether it's a baseball team or a military organization or a company or a nonprofit or a city, I mean, you run on people.
Yeah.
And when people are engaged enthusiastically, when everybody in the boat is rowing the boat to the best of their ability and at the right time and cadence, I mean, that boat is flying down the river. When you get a situation like Gallup says that only 3 in 10 American employees are fully engaged at work. And so that means if you have a rowboat of 10 people, that there are 3 people in the average company that are pulling on the oars with all their might. And then there's probably 6 people who are either like admiring the scenery or just like watching everybody else row. And then invariably there's one person who's trying to put a hole in the bottom of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So, so this happens in any kind of organization, any flavor of organization, doesn't matter. I mean, in the military, yes, it is a hierarchical organization, and there's uniform code of military justice, all this good stuff. And people have amazing ways to resist, to get out of work, to not do things that they don't want to do. Just like any organization. So gaining the enthusiastic engagement of people. So you've got 7 or 8 people rowing the boat in any given company, where people are getting better every day. Those are the kind of things that are, I mean, they apply across the board. And so all of our businesses are people businesses. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when you have happy employees, you're going to have happy customers. When you have, happy soldiers, I mean, soldiers with good morale. When you have employees with good morale, you're going to have happy customers. When you have soldiers with good morale, you're going to have a strong military. When you have a team that has good morale, you're going to get wins, and people are going to enjoy doing it. So it's, some of the words might be different and some of the how-tos might be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, inspiring people to contribute their best to your organization's success is what leadership's all about.
It is. It's funny you mentioned 3 out of 10, Chris. 3 out of 10 in baseball, you're getting paid pretty good. That's very successful.
Yeah, 3 hits.
In a game
now,
that's
if you only had 3 of the 9 actually playing,
yeah, that's true. I mean,
and everybody else,
yeah,
kind of watching, the butterflies.
That's kind of a good way to build it. So we're talking about that 3 out of 10. Let's stick on that a little bit. How do we get those others on board? How do we get them to become accountable, to buy in? What can we say to them or exhibit to them, perhaps? Hey, we've got 3, now we've got 6 or 7, and the boat's starting to pick up steam. How do we get to that?
Right. Yeah. So if you imagine a pie chart, and a pie chart's got that little slice, and that slice is 3. And that's in the green area, and you've got 7 in the red area. And then there's essentially a white line that surrounds the pie slice. And the question is, what's the magic that's happening at the white line where people are voting with their feet from the 7 into the 3, from the red into the green? And what I find this in the military, I find this in businesses, and in athletic teams is this idea of buy-in, getting people to buy in, is really a function of 3 things. The first one is that people need to know what you want them to buy into. So clarity. Clarity is vital. And I use a simple process called the 4 Ws. So whenever setting expectations or goals or objectives or whatever, 4 Ws. Who's responsible? Like, who's got the rose pinned on them? Who's got the bat? Who's got the baseball bat? Second is what? So what do you want them to do? Be very clear about what you want them to do. And then the third W is why. And I connect the what and the why with the 2 words, so that. So I want you to do this so that we get these results and outcomes. And I found that saying so that helped me remember to convey the purpose, convey the why of what I wanted people to do. Because 95%, or whenever somebody didn't meet my expectations, 95% of the time the fault was in the mirror, because I wasn't clear about who was responsible. I was generally pretty good about the what, not always good about the why. So that's when I started using so that, made myself describe the why. And then the fourth W is when. So what's the deadline? When does this due? And so I found that once I started giving guidance using the four W's, that my expectations were clear. People were clear about what I wanted them to buy into. The second element is enlightened self-interest. So people have to believe that they are better off by buying in. And you can't lecture them into believing they're better off. I used to see people all the time. This is in your interest. You'll be better off. It's like your parents screaming at you. This is for your own good. And it never works. People have to come to their own conclusion. Now, we can help that process in some very common sense ways, help people see the advantages and disadvantages, get them to talk about the advantages and disadvantages, do common sense things that reduce the disadvantages and amp up the advantages. For example, ultimately, people have to come to their own conclusion that they're better off. And then third is confidence. You have to have confidence that it's going to work. And you've got to have all three. So if you're missing clarity, then people are they're going to be confused. So they're either going to run 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction, or they're just going to stand still, wait and be told what to do. If you're lacking confidence, then people are going to apply no effort, because they're like, I'm not going to go out on a limb for something I know is just going to fail. And then if people don't believe that they're better off, in fact, if they believe they're worse off, then you're going to invite all sorts of resistance. So yeah, getting enthusiastic engagement, gaining buy-in is really about those three things. If you nail those three things, people are gonna pick up the oars and row.
Yeah, you hit on a bunch of great things, and clarity is important. It's being genuine. I think people look right through that stuff. Are you authentic? I had somebody tell me one time, I was talking at a clinic or something, and there's a friend of mine, he's a coach, 5th round choice of the Boston Red Sox at the time. And he goes, you know what, coach, you're believable. You're believable. And I think that goes a long way, but I really do believe I would add to some of that is that they have to know you care. They have to know they care, and they have to know that they can trust you. And I think, that might be the ingredient you mix into all the things you've talked about. All of a sudden, we've got a winning formula. We've got some success, going on here. This is pretty awesome. But great stuff. I mean, really good stuff. Time flies, and first segment kind of in the well here, and visiting here with retired Army Colonel Chris Kolenda. So much we could talk about, so much we could do. And I'm sure in the military, we're always kind of conscious of team killers. In my book, Every Workplace and Every Team, there are unforeseen forces that can derail success. In my book, Team Killers, I uncover the behaviors, attitudes, and habits that destroy chemistry and show you how to build a winning culture instead. If you're a leader, coach, or teammate who wants lasting success, this book is your playbook. Get your copy of Team Killers today and protect your team from the inside out. And it's available on Amazon. And how about what are your thoughts on what are some team killers that you've encountered from the military?
Oh, sure. There are some obvious ones, of course, like somebody who is just out for themselves and doesn't care about the team. You have toxic talent. You have talented, super talented people who just destroy locker rooms. So those are some of the obvious ones. There are a lot of subtle ones, and I suspect your book talks a lot about those as well. And that's where you have misalignment, values misalignment, expectations misalignment. And so you have people who maybe they're doing what they think is right or best or feels natural to them. and it's not good for the company. And so one of the things that I do with organizations is I use, and so this is a baseball analogy. You'll get a kick out of this. It's called the strike zone, the culture strike zone, and we identify a value or an expectation that they have. So one of my clients there, one of their expectations is act like an owner.
Hmm.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, what exactly does that mean? And what does it not mean? So this has to be something more than like a slogan that you paint on the wall. And so we use a strike zone. It's like, okay, what is the act like an owner strike zone? What does that look like? And inside the strike zone are the very specific behaviors that would exemplify acting like an owner.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the strikes. And then the balls, as you can imagine, are the behaviors outside the strike zone that don't fit. And so you can do this with your core values and the most important expectations you have in your company. And then imagine in the hiring process, if you put those in front of people and say, hey, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself operating inside the strike zone? Or do you see yourself primarily operating outside of it? And there's no judgment here. It's just, we want to know.
Yeah.
Because if you're inside the strike zone, you're going to feel like this is a good fit. And you're going to be together with people who share your standards. If it's outside the strike zone, this is not going to be a good fit. And you're going to be, you're not going to be happy, and neither are people around you. And so what you find when you define your values that specifically is people vote with their feet to be around others of similar standards. And so you're going to have less retention, you're going to have greater accountability and buy-in because people are already on the same page. They believe this, the same things. And I don't mean like, doing things in monochrome. I mean, these are the operating values that we have as an organization, and you want to bring on people and retain people and promote people who are exemplifying those standards, not ones who are deviating from them.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I talk about transfer of blame. It's not my fault, somebody else's fault, which creates drama, right?
Yep.
Which creates pain, which creates fear, which creates contempt, and which ends up being contaminated. You've got an organization, all these things snowball, into this. And, I offer kind of solutions to get out of that.
Right.
But I mean, so many books and so many people tell you how to do things, how to do that. My concept here was, tell me what not to do. How about you tell me what to look out for that I can kind of address for you? But people have their own visions of what team killers are, and they're everywhere. And I think to be able to identify them, and you use the word toxic, they're toxic traits that can fester that you need to get ahead of. What are there some lessons, some traits that translate from, the battlefield, for instance, in the military to a boardroom, to businesses? What how about leadership from those aspects? Are there correlations?
Yes, the language is different, but at the end of the day, it's all about dealing with people. And like when I'll take organizations to places like Gettysburg.
Love Gettysburg.
Yeah. So yeah, you're not far from there, and
not at all.
And so we'll go to Little Round Top.
Love it.
And a Little Round Top will talk about buy-in. So I'll give the 3 elements of buy-in. And talk about how Joshua Chamberlain on July 2nd of 1863.
Bayonet charge, right?
Yeah, he gained buy-in. So what was very interesting, I think even more interesting than the bayonet charge, which ultimately is what won that particular part of the battle and saved the Union Army. But he never would have been in that position had he not gained the buy-in of 117 disgruntled employees, 117 deserters from a different main regiment who thought that their enlistments were up. And so they wanted to go home. They thought they'd signed 2-year enlistments And then they were told, no, you actually signed 3-year enlistments. They weren't too happy about that. So they said, we're done. We're not playing. And so Colonel Chamberlain is handed these 120 deserters on the eve of the battle. And he says, you can shoot them if you want, but you have to guard them. And so Chamberlain's like, all right, we're going into this huge battle. First of all, I can't shoot them because then I can never go back home because they're all from Maine like I am.
Well,
And second, like, I don't want to have to give up combat power to guard these guys. So he's like, well, why don't I see if I can get him to join us? And he did. 117 of these guys out of 120 picked up their rifles and stood their ground at Little Round Top. And it increased Chamberlain's force by 50%. Now, had he not had those guys, had he not done that, he never would have been in a position to do the bayonet charge.
yeah, correct. Right. I mean, I love Gettysburg. I could spend many, many days there.
Yeah.
Like
So we talk about, all right, let's talk about these 3 elements of buy-in. Here's
yeah,
how Chamberlain did it. Now, how do we do this in our business? Where are we at in terms of gaining buy-in for a particular initiative? What kind of behaviors we're seeing? Oh, we're seeing a lot of resistance about this. Okay, well, that probably means that people don't believe they're better off. So let's work on ways that we can have this conversation with our employees about how they feel about this change and what they perceive is the impact of it. And then let's work together to figure out how to address that.
yeah. I mean, that's again outstanding stuff. Nuggets for everybody listening. Where do business leaders fall apart from a leadership standpoint? You talked about not sleeping for 5 days. That might do some of it. I think we can't be all things to all people. I don't know the old Jack vitality curve of 10% on each end. You might have to get rid of 10% are outstanding on the other end, and there's 80% in the middle. That we're going to try to put some people forward to that other section. So, where do they fail? What do business leaders fail, and where are they falling short?
Well, I talked a bit about dependency and how the sort of servant leader ideology has created this expectation, self-imposed expectation that I can have no boundaries, I can't take care of myself, et cetera, and so forth. And there's some very common sense ways to address that, while still leading in ways that support your employees and the good of the organization. So I've mentioned the dependency challenge. Another challenge is leaders have a really hard time with accountability.
Yeah.
I find they don't want to have these difficult conversations with folks. Oftentimes, you mentioned the sort of bell curve of you get 10% maybe awful performance, and you get 10% heroic performance, and we tend to concentrate all of our accountability on the extremes. So we punish or penalize the awful, and then we give monetary awards or badges or medals to the heroic stuff. But you can't, there's only so many of those things that you can do on both sides. And in the meantime, what happens is 80% of the behavior gets neglected. And so if accountability is about shaping future performance and improving future performance, then the money that you actually make is in the 80%, because ultimately you want to shift them, more towards the, people operating above the standard and innovating and trying new things and solving problems on their own, and not just doing the minimum. And so how we give feedback, for example, is really important. You can imagine feedback as a double axis chart, where on the north-south axis you have positive and negative, and the east-west axis you have actionable and not actionable. And so this gives you 4 kinds of feedback. If it's negative and not actionable. So it's a lower left hand, negative and not actionable. Well, that's insult. Chris, that was the worst interview I've ever heard. Okay. I don't know what to do with that. There's no action I could take. If it's positive but not actionable, then that would be like empty praise or flattery. Oh, Tim, you're the greatest interviewer I've ever had.
Yeah.
So again, you can't do anything with that. So what you want to do is you want to be on the right-hand side of the, of the chart. And so if it's negative and it's actionable, then we commonly call that constructive criticism.
Yeah.
And I just invite people to reframe that as constructive support. And you just simply, it's 3 steps. Identify the behavior that you saw that was below standard. 2 is identify the impact that behavior had. And then 3, like action steps on how you're going to work together with them to get it right the next time. I mean, really, it's totally different than, some of the stuff you watch in war movies, where people are yelling at one another. It doesn't really work in the military, and it certainly doesn't work in business.
No, it doesn't. Nobody likes that.
No, exactly. And in the upper right, positive reinforcement is positive and it's actionable. It gives the same 3 steps. Hey, I saw you do this. I saw you had this conversation with a customer who was upset about something, and you made sure that they feel heard. You addressed their situation right away. And the impact is, instead of them walking away angry and a detractor, they're now an ambassador for us. They're happy. They're an ambassador. And hey, I want you to keep doing that. So, number 3 is the appreciation. Like, hey, I want you to continue doing that. I want you to work with others, to do the same thing. And then what you find is the more you do constructive support and positive reinforcement, which don't cost you anything, the more people's behavior goes from okay to closer to awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I think it's funny that 10% on each side, and I think that's a lot of truth to that. Isn't that where we are politically these days? Really, aren't we most of us in the middle, and all the attention goes on the one end, the right end, the left end? It doesn't matter which side of the plate you hit from. I think majority of us live in the middle, somewhere in the middle. The right or the left. It doesn't matter, and I don't know. It just seems like political gamesmanship more than anything, and doesn't serve. I'm not a political guy, by the way, but it doesn't serve the vast majority. I mean, I just don't feel that way, and everybody gets attention on either side, and we do that. We need to focus as businesses and leaders and stuff to really create more leaders, create more people that we can depend on and that are accountable. That if I'm out for 2 weeks, or I was awake for 5 days and slept for 18 hours, then we're okay. Everything's just fine. We're okay.
Right.
I mean, that's great stuff. Is there a discipline? What does that look like from a corporate value to the military? I think a lot of it is the same. I mean, what is that? Jack Nicholson, if people don't follow orders, people die, that kind of stuff on the end of the military spectrum. So we don't have that in the corporate world, but what does the disciplines look like on either end of that?
Yeah. Again, it's at the end of the day, it's all about getting the best out of your people. And so, there are how-tos in the military that just simply don't apply. There's a lot of mythology about the military, that everybody's automatons following orders. It's like, no, that's actually not the case. I remember, in Afghanistan, we did a radical change in strategy. My unit, I led a group of about 800 paratroopers in northeastern Afghanistan, and 2007 and 8, and yeah, the conventional wisdom about what would work there is just flat wrong. And one of the most important things that we had, now that we had to do was, first of all, get over all the confirmation bias that happens with organizations, understand where all the bad reporting was, and re-examine the data from a different point of view. And then based on that, come to a different strategy. And one of the things that we found was that the strategy that was going to work was not the one where we run around with our hair on fire through the mountains chasing bad guys, because it was just simply creating more bad guys. I mean, you take 2 off the battlefield and they recruit 10 more.
Yeah.
The strategy that's going to work is building relationships and building trust with communities. Because ultimately, the fighters come from the communities.
Yeah.
So if you're working together with the communities, people don't have any more reason to fight. It was that common sense. And I mean, it took a lot of leader energy, a lot of time drawing visual models, just like in athletics, you use the X's and O's and you drew pictures. I mean, we drew pictures in the military. And I drew pictures about, okay, when you get everybody disgruntled, all the young fighting age males go to the insurgents. When, people are happy and prosperous, and they feel like they're well governed and meeting their objectives and can have a better life, they gravitate towards the elders. So let's work with the elders and gravitate towards the elders. And we drew all this up in pictures. And it's ultimately how we got people who were very trained their entire lives, their entire professional lives, for very specific things to operate a little bit differently, operate outside their comfort zone. And the result was, as you mentioned, we motivated a big insurgent group to stop fighting and switch sides. And it was all because of all because people bought in, because they understood, like, oh, I see how this works, and I see that I'm better off for doing it, and I have confidence. So some of the tactics that we would use, how we explain stuff, wouldn't make sense in a civilian context, but the general idea, you just change the terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different. So I like to say that there's no such thing as military leadership. There's just leadership, and it's different situations and contexts.
That sounds right. We'll touch a little bit more on that, on your stories from Afghanistan and wherever you want to go after this segment's over. And one more question for you on this segment is, what does legacy mean to you after all your service in the military career? What does it mean? What does legacy mean to Chris Kolenda?
Yeah, for me, it means that there are some positive things that people are paying forward. And I've taken a lot of positive things from the extraordinary leaders that I've served with and been mentored by. And none of these leaders, they don't want you to pay them back. They just want you to pay that forward.
Yeah.
And so if there are things that people are paying forward to make their organizations, to make this world a better place, then I feel that, I've done okay.
Yeah, I think you did okay. I think you did okay. When the game is over, what will people remember about you? My book, What is Your Legacy, challenges leaders, athletes, and everyday people to think beyond the scoreboard, beyond the battlefield. It's about purpose, impact, and the mark you leave on others. If you are ready to define your legacy and live it with intention, this book will guide the way. Get your copy of What is Your Legacy today and start shaping the story only you can tell. You can get that on Amazon as well as Team Killers. And, I did a podcast earlier. Somebody asked me, who is Tim Neiman? What are you, And I said, what, when I pass away and enter to the next go to heaven hopefully. And I said, I just want on my tombstone, he was a pretty good guy. That'll work for me. He was a good guy. The world is full of so many good people. And I always say in my talk sometimes, if you can't find one, make sure you be one. It's not
Right.
that hard to do. Be a good
Yeah.
person. And I
Well,
think
and
that's part of
yeah.
it.
No, you're absolutely right. I think we collect what we project into the world.
Mm. As my mom would say, laying up treasures, right? We're laying
Yeah.
up treasures. And I think we do project that. And I think people will, migrate to those who believe in it and live it, and I think I've always tried to live my life in that. And some of those lessons you don't learn, you know, overnight. They take time to develop. And I think it's important to realize what really is important to you, whether you're coaching a team or leading a company or something else. And you hit the nail on the head. The organization's team revolve around people, period.
Mm,
I mean, that's what it is. People make it go. I want to talk a little bit more about the counterinsurgency stuff and, how
mm,
that all came about. And then you ended up, getting the Taliban to the peace talks, to the table, and
right.
all that. And I'm guessing it has something to do with the way we ended segment two. But what can you share, with that experience? I think everybody would love to know.
Yeah, well, one, I guess, illustrative example was my main outpost had been getting rocket attacks like several times a month when
Hmm.
we first got into the country. And it was getting, well, not only were they annoying, a 170 millimeter rocket can launch shrapnel the size of a baseball, about the length of a football field.
Hmm.
And yeah, it will wreck your day. And we had a couple of guys wounded already through these rocket attacks, and we did. I mean, they were being fired from the mountain valley, or a mountain plateau,
Hmm.
several valleys away on the other side of this raging river that we
They had
couldn't
the
cross except by
they had the high
helicopter.
ground, right? They were on the high
Yeah,
ground.
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so we're, I mean, doing everything the Army taught us how to do, and none of it was working. And as a lead, I was like, these I 300 people on this particular outpost. We had about 300 or so people. They're all counting on me to like figure this out. And I mean, we've tried everything. I don't know what else to do. And so part of it, I felt like I was failing as a leader. And fortunately, during you know, peacetime, our unit was together for shoot over a year before we deployed, and always believed in like disagreement is valuable. You disagree agreeably, you can, but disagreement does not equal disrespect. So, and through disagreement, we wind up with better ideas. And every innovation started with disagreement. When you think about it,
No question.
yeah, and so I got the brain trust together and said, hey, I mean, these rockets aren't stopping, and it's only a matter of time before something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
So let's figure out, like, what do we do about this? Because we've done X, Y, Z, A, B, and C, and none of it's made any difference. And I mean, we're all kind of looking at each other, and a few different options and stuff. And then my Afghan counterpart, we had an Afghan Army battalion commander who his battalion served with us on the same outpost. He had about 300 of his soldiers there, and so they're dealing with the rockets too. And he said, I said, Shirama, what do you think? And he says, Commander, that's what he called me, Commander, we don't know why these brothers are angry.
Interesting.
I'd like to go talk to them. And now this is a time when the Afghan army wasn't supposed to be operating on their own. And they would be going on their own across this raging river, into the mountains, and a place where we didn't have any visual contact, really hard time supporting them and all this stuff. And so on the one hand, part of me is like, he's exactly right. We don't know why these brothers are angry. And we need to go talk to them. They won't respond to any of our like requests to come visit because they probably think we'll just throw them in jail. And so like his option is really the only viable option if we're going to do something other than deal with these rockets several times a month for the next 15 months. And so, I mean, huge career consequences to this. And I was just like, it's the right thing to do. So I know if I asked for permission, they would say no. So I was like, all right, we'll just beg for forgiveness.
Beg for forgiveness.
And so he goes off, and he comes back at the end of the day, and I said, Sherma, what'd you find out? He says, well, yes, they're the ones shooting rockets at us. It's like, okay, why? And he said, well, a couple of years ago, special forces and commandos came in and they raided their village at night, and all sorts of, they disrespected the elders, and all sorts of bad things happen. And so this is retaliation. And it's like, okay, well, I can understand that. Retaliation is part of the Pashtun code. If you're dishonored, you're duty bound to retaliate. So what else you find out? And he said, well, they really want their kids to go into school. And they showed me the school, and it was a building with 3 walls and no roof. 300 girls go in the morning, 250 boys go in the afternoon. They have one little chalkboard, and everybody else writes numbers and letters in the dirt with a stick. So they really want their kids to go to school. And so we had been collecting, like when people ask me, hey, what do you want us to send? I said, don't send us candy. Send us notebooks and pens, because I mean, education is like one of those things we all want what's best for our kids. So people sent us a bunch of notebooks and pens. And so we had oodles of them at this point. And so like on the one hand, I'm like, all right, is this negotiating with terrorists or providing aid and comfort to the enemy if I send notebooks and pens? And so, you deal with, these kind of weird things that we had to deal with. And at the end of the day, I was just like, hey, Sher Ahmad, would you be willing to go back there? He said, of course. So we loaded his trucks up, notebooks and pens, sent them off. And he came back, and at the end of the day said they were very happy. I had no idea what was going to happen next. I didn't know if they would send rockets our way, I had no idea. And, but thought that maybe we had built a bridge, hoped that we had built a bridge. The next day, the front gate of the outpost calls, Colonel, there's a bunch of elders here to see you. And it's like, oh, where are they from? Like, they're from this particular village.
How about that?
Wow. So they all came in, and we greeted them, and, we're kind of going around, greeting everybody. And we get to the head elder, and we greet, and he hands me a stack of papers. I said, what is this? He said, these are thank you notes written by our children using the notebooks and pens that you gave them. If there would be more, he said. Most of the kids didn't think their handwriting was good enough for you. So, your heart absolutely melts. And, I mean, that led to us working together on a bunch of initiatives, to include working together to with a nonprofit to bring a school, for that village. And we never got another rocket attack. And that was just one example of many, of these kind of conversations in different villages where, our people are just, they're doing extraordinary things, making extraordinarily creative solutions, because they know at the end of the day that the more we build these kind of relationships, the more people are, the more people are going to respond.
Pens and notebooks greater than any bomb ever dropped, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
What a great story. And, and again, the things we talked about, they just have to know you care a little bit. And we do care about your
Right.
your future and your sons and daughters and everything. How can we help? And I
Yeah,
think if
we're human beings. We're not aliens
yeah,
who descend from an iron box, wearing
yeah,
sunglasses and, pointing weapons at people. That's,
yeah,
that's not gonna get you anywhere.
no,
What's
not at
gonna
all.
get you somewhere is, yeah, I mean, hey, let's meet on a human to human level and figure out, ways that we can, create win-win-wins,
Yeah.
where
What's
everybody's better off.
the most people under your command? Was the highest number, Chris? Underneath you,
In combat, it was 800.
800. Okay.
Outside of that, 2,500.
Well, very cool. And I mean, I wanted to ask you, what's the worst scenario you ran into, in combat, or what's the worst? I'm sure you saw a lot of things that are just unfathomable, but something stick out to you like, wow, I'll never forget this. And maybe it emphasizes why you were there, your decision making and the
Mm.
mission and everything else. But anything stick out to you in that regard?
Well, I mean, the ones that the tough situations that stick out to me the most, of course, are the six troopers from my unit who were killed in action there, and their names are Chris Pfeiffer, Adrian Hike, Jacob Lowell, Ryan Fritchie, Tom Bostic, and Dave Boris. Um, and those days stand with me. I know the days that they died. Talking to their parents after they've been, notified, and their spouses, some were married. You don't forget that, um, and you want to, in combat at the time, operate in ways that honor their service and sacrifice, and the same thing afterwards. And one of the things that I undertook at the 15-year mark of our deployment was to do a 1,700-mile bicycle ride to visit their graves, and then we raised enough money from that to start the Saber Six Foundation. And the Saber Six Foundation works with veterans who want to turn post-combat stress into growth. I'm not sure if you are aware of the numbers. We lost in the post 9/11 wars just over 7,000 service
Wow.
members killed in action. In that same period of time, actually to date, from 9/11 to date, over 150,000 veterans died by suicide. And that doesn't even count the overdoses and other deaths of despair. So you could fill Arrowhead Stadium, or you could fill, Steelers Stadium twice, and still have people waiting to get inside. My unit has lost, the veterans from my unit. We lost more to suicides and overdoses after 15 years than we did to enemy fire, and so the Saber Six Foundation is really near and dear to my heart, and the impact has been extraordinary. So for the people actively involved in our programs, no suicides, no overdoses, no attempts,
Awesome.
and so now we're scaling this to bring the essentially the magic of reconnecting people who served and fought together back together and giving them opportunities for growth. Now we're scaling that, and so I'm very proud of that. We're having our annual gala in Washington D.C. on May 7th. So
Wow, that's awesome.
I
How do
appreciate.
people find you, Chris? How do people find you with
Uh,
Saber Six?
yeah, they can find me on my website, chriskolenda.com. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, as are you, and so if you see one of if you look at one of Tim's posts, you'll probably see me liking it, and
Thank you. Appreciate the
and
support.
yeah. So those are the easiest ways. And then if you're interested in Saber Six Foundation,
Yep.
then our website saber6foundation.com is the best way.
Tremendous. And just out of my own curiosity here, so it was 07, 08 ish. Is that the last time
Yes.
you were? So
That
Bin Laden.
that was when I was commanding out there. Now, I
Yeah.
served subsequent tours out there as a senior advisor to Generals McChrystal, Dunford, and
Okay.
Petraeus.
So the Bin Laden chase, right? Were you up in Tora Bora where, I think that had already passed by then, but
Yeah.
any any intel from way back then and trying to find that guy?
Well, everybody was wanting to
Aware.
find him, and there were not much information. And fortunately, we were able to track him down.
Yeah.
The United States of America, were able to track him down.
Yeah.
And I remember that day pretty well too.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Last question I ask every guest: what does straight lines mean to Chris Kolenda?
A straight line to me, you do the right thing. You have standards, and you follow through on those standards. And when you do, you move in a straight line to from where you are now to where you want to be.
Yeah, and the path to success we all know is not a straight line by far. You've made unbelievable decisions when you needed to, great decisions. I think we're all in that in some fashion if you're in a leadership position. And, how fast can I change the tire? As one guest told me, how fast can I get the train back on the tracks and
Mm,
rolling down? And how quickly can I chase that North Star? Because I always have that aspiration of where I want to go. How can I get there? What can I get
mm.
there? And there's no turning back. Just keep moving forward. Onward we all go. Terrific stuff. Thank you for joining me on Straight Lines, where leadership lessons meet the game of life. If you enjoyed today's show, share it with your friends and colleagues. Subscribe and connect with me on social media for more insights. And if you want to dive deeper, check out the two books, What is Your Legacy and Team Killers? Please visit the website, CoachTimNeiman.com. Check out the YouTube channel at the Neiman Legacy Network. Until next time, lead with clarity, play with purpose, and keep those lines straight. Colonel Chris Kolenda, I salute you for everything you've done and continue to do. And I hope people seek you out at, chriskolenda.com. Definitely look out to Saber Six if you need assistance. And I am honored and thrilled to have you with me today. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Tim, and the salute's right back at you.